Okay, marathon. Where do I even start? Let's just get this out of the way first. Regardless of my tone in this video, I'm still a firm believer that Marathon looks sick as hell, and that given the proper treatment from a competent studio, it could truly revolutionize the gaming industry. And I'm not even exaggerating, I genuinely feel like this game had a lot of potential. When the first reveal came out in 2024, I think I remember shedding a tear or two if I'm gonna be honest with you. Even seeing the teaser trailer leading up to the gameplay reveal, like with that pink cat that became a meme for about a week, and the ARG element to all the marketing surrounding the trailer was just super cryptic and mysterious. Man, everything seemed like it was shaping up to be one of the coolest, most unique gaming reveals in a long while. Now, I wasn't entirely disappointed when I saw the reveal trailer with everybody else and realized it was an extraction shooter. After all, extraction shooters are kind of hot right now, and 3 months ago I could have totally seen Bungie of all studios finding a way to make one that is unique in the scope of a franchise like Marathon, especially given how fucking amazing that cinematic short was. But the more I watched the trailer and kind of started to connect the dots since then, my overwhelming fanboy hype slowly turned into cautious optimism, which started to turn into worry, quickly followed recently by complete disappointment. If you've been keeping an eye on Marathon the way I have the last few months, you'd have learned about the most recent controversy surrounding Marathon and some of the art found in the game. To give you a quick rundown, on May 15th, Twitter user AntiReal posted a tweet revealing that parts of her artwork that she made back in 2017 seem to have been ripped directly from her portfolio and plastered onto some of the in-game assets within Marathon. And just to be clear, I mean exact one-to-one copies of her original artwork that you could find directly in the game. So again, this isn't just some weird claim from some random person, this is undeniable proof. And I have some screenshots of what we're talking about here. You have a poster she made in July 15th, 2017 with a unique design that says Aleph, Dark Space Haulage Logistics, even with the diagonal line box underneath it that was straight up copied and pasted into the game on multiple assets. You even have this arrow design printed onto some of the buildings and tarps, and this bar with these icons taken right from her poster and just put onto some of the assets. You can even see some of the code fragment art she's made being slightly altered and used on Marathon's website, and for the ARG Bungie used to market the reveal. Years ago, AntiReal even teased that she hid the Lost meme in one of her artworks, and what do you know, there it is on a whiteboard in-game. And you know what, one more, just for the fun of it. This poster, which was part of her daily series of posting art called AntiReal Daily Series, being directly copied and pasted onto the game, in which they forgot to take the text off of beforehand. So the name of the artist they stole this from is still on the decal. First off, do you know how unbelievably lazy it is to, first off, just copy and paste someone else's art into your game, but just to not even remove the text at all? It's like they're not even trying to hide it. Their name is literally right there. You know, since the gameplay reveal dropped and people have gotten to play the alpha build recently, Marathon has not been without criticism in the slightest. Even though I wasn't able to get into the alpha to check it out, I've heard complaints about the gameplay, the pacing, the time to kill, the fact that it's an extraction shooter, and even more, a hero shooter. I've heard complaints about the fact that there's no proximity chat, no player customization, no PvE, which is a big deal in a franchise that was strictly PvE with the original games, and most importantly to me, the fact that you cannot run a solo session by yourself. Now compare this to Arc Raiders, a new extraction shooter type game currently in pre-release that's for more of a casual player base that comes without all the baggage that an incredibly niche game like Marathon has to deal with, and you get one pretty damning comparison. But even with all of this criticism, the one thing this game had that was, for the most part, unanimously loved and agreed to have been its biggest strength was its art style. I am a huge fan of Marathon's art style. I love the kind of minimalist modernism with the sort of plasticky cyberpunk feel surrounded by a dystopian undertone that slaps in quite literally any iteration you find it in, right? Like, it kind of reminds me of Mirror's Edge and how that game felt. It just works so well and complements the game's setting to a T, which is an important part to making your world feel immersive. So you can just about imagine my disappointment when I found that, at least in some part, this game's beautiful art style that hooked so many people onto this game in the first place amounts nothing more than an art style inspired or partially built off the ripping and plagiarism of a talented independent artist who is just trying to turn their passion for making art into a way to make a living. By a $3.6 billion AAA game development studio backed by a mega gaming publisher in Sony, nonetheless. How on the nose for something like this to happen in the big 2025, am I right? The artist in question here, Anti-Real, has followed up her first tweet with the following. Bungie is of course not obligated to hire me when making a game that draws overwhelmingly from the same design language I have refined for the last decade, but clearly my work was good enough to pillage for ideas and plaster all over their game without pay or attribution. I don't have the resources nor the energy to spare to pursue this legally, but I have lost count of the number of times a major company has deemed it easier to pay a designer to imitate or steal my work than to write me an email. In 10 years, I have never made a consistent income from this work, and I am tired of designers from huge companies moodboarding and parasiting my designs while I struggle to make a living. You see, the thing is, Bungie seems to have a serious problem with understanding the concept of intellectual property and originality. Believe it or not, Bungie has already gotten into trouble by either copying someone else's art or using someone's art to inspire their own, not one, not two, but three. No wait, actually 4 times in just the last 4 years. In 2021, they used fan art for their Destiny 2 Witch Queen trailer without using the artist's consent. In 2023, they used near identical fan art in an in-game cutscene without the artist's consent. And in 2024, they used a fan's art design of a gun from Destiny and used it to design the Ace of Spades Nerf gun that they would then try to sell as their own. And now we have the controversy which we're just hearing as of right now, where Bungie used poster designs from 2017 in-game without the original artist's consent. Although they did end up compensating the first 3 artists eventually, even if they did forget about one for a whole year, but that's besides the point. And you want to know what's funny about all these times they've been caught stealing artists' work? It's that every single time they were caught, they released a statement saying something along the lines of, oh, somebody who used to work at Bungie did this, or an external vendor messed up or something, or we're looking internally to find out who did this, and that's all we ever hear. They don't reveal exactly who did it, because after all, stealing someone's intellectual property is considered a legitimate crime. But it's always some anonymous guy who used to work at Bungie, or some third-party guy they contracted that they can't get a hold of. Well, just after finding out this happened a 4th time through Anti-Real's tweet, the official Marathon Dev Team account posted the following statement on May 15th. We immediately investigated a concern regarding unauthorized use of artist decals in Marathon and confirmed that a former Bungie artist included these in a texture sheet that was ultimately used in-game. The issue was unknown by our existing art team, and we are still reviewing how this oversight occurred. We take matters like this very seriously. We have reached out to Anti-Real to discuss this issue and are committed to do right by the artist. As a matter of policy, we do not use the work of artists without their permission. To prevent similar issues in the future, we are conducting a thorough review of our in-game assets, specifically those done by the former Bungie artist, and implementing stricter checks to document all artist contributions. We value the creativity and dedication of all artists who contribute to our games, and we are committed to doing right by them. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. So this time, it's yet another nameless, faceless, former Bungie artist that did the bad thing, and he's already gone, so we don't need to worry about it, guys. Do you see why people aren't really convinced? You know, it's actually kind of smart from a PR standpoint to just blame it on some random guy that nobody can put a name or a face to, especially making it a point that they don't work there anymore, because that kind of gives you a way to avoid accountability for anything that happens. Another reason nobody is really convinced by this statement is that Joseph Cross, Marathon's franchise art director, so, you know, the guy in charge of all of Marathon's art, has been following Anti-Real's account for years. This means that either 1, this statement is total bullshit and there might be some crazy cover-up going on, or 2, Marathon's franchise art director has actually seen this artwork online before and it somehow made its way into the game without him noticing, with him following Anti-Real's account being a mere coincidence. So again, it's either that there's something weirdly malicious going on, or Marathon's franchise art director is just not looking at the art that's being put into his own game. I'm not one to throw accusations out there, and I'm convinced it was a simple oversight, but even that would be pretty dumb in of itself considering how Bungie is prone to stealing art from the community, and you would think they'd have better safeguards in place by now given that history, but who am I, you know? I'm just some random YouTube guy projectile vomiting into a fucking microphone. You know, just to play devil's advocate for a second here, it's not like Joe Cross just used Anti-Real's art to base the entirety of Marathon's art style off of. Joe Cross himself has always been a huge fan of this kind of style. He's made art himself depicting this same sort of aesthetic in his own personal work, even before 2017. But the problem here is that it's seeming more and more like as if the art team for Marathon used her art specifically to sort of inspire the kind of style they wanted to depict in the entire game, and less like it just so happened that a lot of her art was stolen directly and plastered over the game's environment. Now, since Anti-Real first posted her tweet, and everybody's been finding this out, and I think there are over like 10 million views on her first tweet alone, a lot of people have been giving donations to Anti-Real to help pay for lawyer fees in the event she did want to pursue legal action against Bungie, and also just to help support her artwork in general, which is pretty cool. I think Anti-Real and Bungie are currently talking about some sort of compensation, or maybe by the time this video's out an agreement's been made already, because if she were to take them to court, Bungie would have to be fighting 2 court cases at the very same time. What's that? 2 court cases? Wait, you mean there's another one? Yeah, that's right. Bungie is already fighting a court case involving, believe it or not, another copyright infringement claim. This time from a writer claiming that the Red War campaign, being the main campaign for Destiny 2, which the game launched with, stole narrative elements from his book that he posted to WordPress a while before. Problem is, Bungie completely vaulted that campaign and its source files and have no way of accessing it themselves anymore because of compatibility issues with the current Destiny 2 code. So they can't even load up their own game to look for the evidence, and now they're having a hard time trying to find original footage to use as evidence. So let's just say Bungie cutting Destiny 2's campaign that everybody had already paid for, mind you, is certainly biting themselves in the ass right now, deservedly so. But back to Marathon, Bungie had already scheduled a developer feedback stream called PlayMA, where they would talk about the game some more, while also responding to some player feedback, while also showing some more gameplay in the background. Well, this was scheduled ahead of time for May 16th, which happened to be the day after all this drama got out. And let me tell you, I ran some pretty bad live streams on my own setup at home, but none of it comes close to how insanely busted this Marathon stream was. Holy hell. The audio was cut out of sync, you couldn't even hear some of the audio the hosts were hearing, the video kept glitching out, they had to play a game of telephone because one of their headsets wasn't picking up audio, and even worse, you know how I mentioned they were supposed to have gameplay running in the background? Well, because of the stolen art, they had teams actively scrubbing through the game files while all of this was going on and couldn't show any of the gameplay because they didn't even know which of it actually belongs to them or not. Isn't that insane? The whole thing was just a disaster. Joe Cross was there himself as a co-host, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. He ended up reading his own personal statement on all this. Meanwhile, the chat was all spamming, "Plagiarism will make me God," and some people were chatting art raiders, which, come on, that was pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. You know, I don't know what was sadder, the little plant in the background, or seeing Joe Cross sitting there having to watch the chat the entire time. A few other things they mentioned in the livestream to respond to feedback was when they revealed how there were a huge number of solos playing the game, which I have to say is a huge sign that there needs to be a solo mode in this game on release. Not having a solo mode would definitely cripple player retention because trying to complete contracts while also having to worry about randoms in your squad is just a recipe for disaster. And imagine trying to convince 2 of your friends to pay $40 to play this game with you, you know? I just can't see any of that working well at all. They also teased some player customization and that they were fixing the outside lighting, but one thing that people were upset about at first was that there would be no proximity chat, which I agree would be pretty sick to have even if some players want to turn it off in the settings. But Bungie responded with, "Oh, we're brainstorming how to do that," which first off is such a bullshit answer because as hard as game development could be sometimes, you don't need to brainstorm proximity chat, like what the fuck? Just take our mic feed and put it in the game so people around me can hear it. I don't get what's so hard, other games do this just fine. So needless to say, this live stream was just terrible. I don't know why they even went through with this in the first place. And now we get to this point in the video. What should Bungie do after all of this? This has been one of the worst pre-release periods to a game I can remember in a long time, to be honest with you. There's not a lot Bungie can do to save this game from being dead on arrival. Before all of this stolen art drama, Bungie had already seen the negative feedback coming off the gameplay reveal and the closed alpha, and they had reportedly scrapped their original June marketing plans, including the release of a new trailer and starting pre-orders. There were also talks of shifting to doing a roadmap of public playtests, as someone called it. I'm assuming that would kind of play out like the Halo Infinite flights did, where they just allowed people to play early versions of the game and slowly updated those builds over time all the way up until release. But I can't really tell you how well that went for Halo Infinite's launch, so you know, who knows what that would look like for Marathon. Then there came the onslaught of articles and statements from current and former Bungie developers, namely with Paul Tassi, a prominent game development insider, releasing this article describing how the studio is dealing with all this. He described that studio morale is in free fall across all departments and that the vibes have never been worse. It was also revealed in this article that Marathon was originally pitched by a higher-up good old boy Bungie leadership, and that as far back as 5 years ago, the developers were telling them what would and wouldn't work, but were often ignored. This includes the suggestion of some sort of PvE component. In addition, and this one's real bad, Paul Tassi revealed that in order for Marathon to be considered a success in the industry, it needs to reach the top 5 NPD sales of 2025. This means that Marathon needs to be in the top 5 best-selling games in a year where its competition is Expedition 33, Doom the Dark Ages, whatever Call of Duty releases this year's Madden, Monster Hunter Wilds, and more interestingly, Arc Raiders. No way in hell is this game coming anywhere close to reaching the top 5 best-selling this year. It's just not happening. Another former Bungie developer came out with posts on Twitter and Blue Sky that are now deleted, saying that Marathon's leadership was extremely toxic and humiliating, where they called for a complete overhaul of studio leadership. Just to note, this is the same guy who said last year that he left Bungie because, quote, their leadership is the worst I've worked with, describing rampant micromanagement, frequent toxicity, and violations of their core values. Also saying, every day was someone telling me I'm not allowed to speak on any issue or problem in a professional tone. And another thing he said last year after one of the layoffs Bungie had done was, quote, it was on our minds since the last layoffs in October 2023. We asked Pete, the same Bungie CEO who spent millions of dollars on a vintage car collection right after a round of layoffs, and Pete's response to this was that it was a lever he'd pull again. On top of this, Destin Legary, and I hope I said that right, recently talked to some anonymous former Bungie developers and posted the conversations in a YouTube video exposing that leadership prioritized monetization over player experience and that they almost blocked some of the in-game PvP armor in Destiny 2 from being earnable to players because the glow effect on them was so cool, leadership was concerned it would impact paid cosmetic sales. It was also stated that during the Sony acquisition, internal language shifted from studio to company, games to product, and players to customers. And just one more to top it all off, another former developer stated that Bungie's problems stem from a lack of player empathy, disconnected leadership, and a corporate-first culture, and that everything happening to Bungie is because of greed. And I'm not the kind of guy that likes to prey on a game's downfall before it's even released, because who really wants that, right? But as a Halo fan who's dealt with my favorite game franchise being adopted by the same kind of out-of-touch developers for over a decade now, I guess you could say,
that stench, I've smelled it before.
You know, where all the big decision makers who don't even play games think they know how to make one themselves, all while ignoring the developers who actually know what they're doing, but it doesn't matter what they think because I'm the boss and the buck stops with me, blah 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 blah. This has gotten all too familiar and it doesn't spell any good for Bungie as a studio. In fact, I bet all the people who've been screaming about how Bungie should take over Halo again are real quiet now, huh? It's almost like Bungie and Halo are over a dozen years removed and Bungie isn't nearly the same studio anymore. Wow, it's crazy how time works. To make matters even worse, in Destin's video, some of these former Bungie developers highlighted major issues with Bungie's HR department and how they've been working in their own self-interest, intentionally covering up many serious harassment complaints of the studio just so they can get a multi-million-dollar exit when they eventually left. HR would allegedly keep close tabs on employees' social media activity, and anyone who spoke up about company issues on social media or even just promoted their own work at Bungie would expect to get a warning email within about 15 minutes. Man, if only they worked as hard making a good game than they did muzzling their own developers. Now there is one thing that can save Marathon, and one thing only. This game needs, and I mean needs, a delay. I cannot see this game succeeding at all if Bungie and Sony decide to release this 4 months from now. Considering how rotten this game's development was from the inside, this game having any amount of real success would require a complete change of vision, and there's no way you can do that in even a year's time, let alone 4 months. It's honestly crazy that Bungie hasn't announced a delay already, saying that the game is having a lot more negative feedback than people were expecting. Then you have the stolen art dilemma added onto that, then with the live stream, and then all the hit piece articles after that. You just cannot convince me that if they release this game this year, that they aren't aren't just money laundering at this point. There's just no way. And that's not even accounting for the miserable state of Bungie as a studio. Sony has infected this studio like the fucking bubonic plague. They have so many bad actors working in some of the highest of leadership roles. I think they'd be lucky to fix every issue the game has, even with a delay, given how out of touch the decision makers really are. It kind of makes you think, with all these allegations and lawsuits and wasted money, if Bungie will even be a studio given a couple of years' time. It's kind of sad what Sony has done to them since the acquisition, to be honest. So that's gonna round out today's video. You know, I really want this game to succeed. I'm not gonna sit here like one of those outrage farming channels and just point and laugh when a game fails because I'm evil and want the engagement. I just know that fans of this studio deserve a game like Marathon to be successful, and the core developers even more so. But the way it's looking now, unless a big decision is made to delay this game, I doubt Marathon will be anything but dead on arrival. So as always, thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video if you enjoyed it. It would mean a lot. And I will see you guys next time. This is Zombie, signing out.